The Spitfire shuddered as cannon rounds tore past the canopy. 3 Messerschmitt 109s closed from above, their noses lit with muzzle flash. The pilot was 17 years old. He had 19 hours of combat time. Every instinct screamed to dive, to run, to use gravity and speed to escape. Instead, he pulled the throttle back. The engine noise dropped. The airspeed began to bleed. His wingman's voice crackled over the radio, sharp with panic. "What are you doing?" The Spitfire slowed. The 109s closed the distance, and what happened in the next 8 seconds would be taught in fighter academies for the next 80 years. If you want more true stories of impossible moments from World War II, subscribe to the channel. It was July 1943. The skies over Sicily burned with tracer fire and engine smoke. Operation Husky had turned the Mediterranean into a killing ground. Allied bombers pounded Axis airfields while German and Italian fighters rose to meet them. Every sortie was a numbers game. Every pilot knew the odds. And on this particular morning, those odds were about to break in a way no one expected. The pilot's name was Eric Hartwell. He was not supposed to be there. Born in a village outside Manchester, he had grown up reading aircraft manuals instead of playing football. His father worked in a textile mill. His mother cleaned houses. When war broke out, Eric was 15. By the time he enlisted in the Royal Air Force, he was 16 and a half. He lied about his age. The recruiter knew. He signed him anyway. Training was brutal. Eric passed the academics with perfect marks. He could strip an engine blindfolded. He knew fuel mixtures, gun convergence, stall speeds, and energy tactics better than his instructors. But in the cockpit, he was slow. His hands were cautious. His reactions lagged. During mock dogfights, older cadets called him the professor. It was not a compliment. One flight officer wrote in his file, "Hartwell thinks too much. Combat requires instinct. Recommend ground duty." Eric did not wash out. He graduated on a technicality. The RAF needed pilots. The attrition rate over Europe was apocalyptic. Squadrons were burning through men faster than training schools could replace them. So Eric received his wings, his posting, and a Spitfire Mark V with his name stenciled below the canopy. He joined 243 Squadron in North Africa 2 weeks before the invasion of Sicily. His squadron mates were veterans. Most had flown over Malta during the siege. They had seen friends burn. They had bailed out over the sea. They had learned to kill or be killed in the span of a heartbeat. Eric was polite, quiet, and utterly out of place. During briefings, he asked questions. Why did doctrine say to never turn with the 109? Why were dive attacks preferred over level runs? Why did energy retention matter more than instantaneous turn rate? The other pilots exchanged glances. One of them, a South African named Van der Merwe, finally said, "Because that's how you stay alive, Professor." The nickname stuck. On his 3rd mission, Eric made his first mistake. He broke formation to pursue a damaged Macchi. He chased it for 2 minutes, burning fuel and altitude. When he finally got a firing solution, his guns jammed. He had to limp back alone, dodging flak over the coast. The squadron leader chewed him out in front of everyone. "You think, Hartwell. You don't fly. Thinking gets you killed." Eric nodded. He did not argue. But that night, he sat in his tent with a notebook and sketched the engagement. He drew angles, velocities, pursuit curves. He noted the moment the Macchi had banked left, and he had followed. Predictable, committed, exposed. He realized something. The manual said to pursue damaged enemies, but the manual assumed the enemy would run straight. It assumed predictability, and that assumption was a trap. He kept a notebook. He kept sketching. The mission brief on July 19th was standard. 12 Spitfires would escort a group of B. 25 Mitchells hitting a supply depot near Jela. Fighter opposition was expected. Intelligence reported at least 20 Bf 109s stationed at the nearby airfield. The bombers would go in low. The escorts would fly high cover. If bounced, protocol was simple. Dive, gain speed, extend away, then climb back with the energy advantage. Never turn, never slow down, never let the 109s dictate the fight. Eric listened. He nodded. He did not mention the flaw he had noticed. If everyone dived and everyone extended, what happened when the 109s anticipated it? What happened when they positioned themselves along the escape route? He did not ask. He had learned that much. The formation took off at dawn. The Spitfires climbed through broken cloud, their Merlin engines a synchronized roar. Eric flew as Red 3, tucked in on van der Merwe's wing. The Mediterranean glittered below, deceptively peaceful. The bombers appeared on schedule, a tight box of 12 Mitchells lumbering toward the coast. The Spitfire slotted into position above and behind. Everything felt routine. Then the radio sparked. Bandits. Hi. 4 o'clock. Eric craned his neck. Sunlight shattered across his canopy. He squinted, searching. Then he saw them. Dark specks, high and fast, dropping from 25,000 feet. BF-109 Gustavs. At least 15. They had altitude. They had speed. They had every advantage. The squadron leader's voice cut through the static. All red flights, break right and dive. Gain separation. Do not engage. The Spitfires peeled away, noses dropping, throttles firewalled. The 109s followed. They did not fire yet. They were patient. They knew the geometry. They knew the Spitfires would run, and they knew where. Eric followed van der Merwe into the dive. The airspeed indicator climbed. 200 knots. 250. 300. The controls stiffened. The engine howled. Eric glanced back. The 109s were still there, matching the dive. Not closing, but not falling behind either. They were hurting the Spitfires, funneling them. And then Eric saw it. 3 more 109s, low and level, waiting along the escape vector. The bounce was a trap. The dive was expected. The entire engagement had been planned. He keyed his radio. Red leader, they're boxing us. 3 more low at our 10 o'clock. Copy. All flights, break left. Extend north. But breaking left meant turning. Turning meant bleeding speed. And bleeding speed against 109s was suicide. Eric felt the wrongness in his gut. Doctrine was failing. The manual was failing. Everyone was doing exactly what the Germans expected. Van der Merwe's Spitfire rolled left. Eric started to follow. Then he stopped. His hand hovered over the stick. His mind raced through the notebook sketches, the pursuit curves, the energy equations. If the enemy expected a dive, and then expected a break, what if you did neither? What if you gave them something they could not anticipate? His throttle was still wide open. He eased it back. Not off. Just back. The engine noise dropped. The airspeed began to bleed. His Spitfire started to drift behind the formation. Van der Merwe's voice exploded in his headset. 3, stay with me. What are you doing? Eric did not answer. His eyes were locked on the 109s behind him. They were closing now, sensing a straggler. 2 of them broke off from the main group. They nosed down, angling for an easy kill. Eric's mouth was dry. His hands were steady. He pulled the throttle back further. The Spitfire slowed. The 109s accelerated. The distance collapsed. Tracer rounds streaked past his wing. Cannon fire punched holes in his tailplane. He could see the lead 109 clearly now, less than 300 yards behind, its nose glowing with gunfire. His flight instructor's voice echoed in his memory. Speed is life. Slow down and you die. Eric pulled the stick back. The Spitfire's nose rose. The airspeed dropped through 200 knots. 180. 160. The controls went mushy. The stall warning rattled. Every fiber of his training screamed that he was seconds from spinning into the sea. The lead 109 closed to 200 yards. Its pilot must have been grinning. An easy kill. A sitting duck. He fired again. Rounds tore through Eric's port wing. The Spitfire shook. Eric held the nose high. 150 knots. 140. The stall was coming. He could feel it in the stick, in the airframe, in the way the wings stopped biting the air. And then the 109 overshot. It happened faster than thought. The German pilot had been flying at 400 knots, closing on a target he assumed would keep diving or turning. Instead, the target had slowed to near stall. The 109's speed became its enemy. It flashed past Eric's canopy. close enough that he saw the pilot's face, saw the shock, saw the frantic correction as the German realized his mistake. The second 109 followed, overshooting high and right, unable to slow or turn in time. Eric shoved the throttle forward. The Merlin roared back to life. He kicked the rudder and rolled inverted. The Spitfire snapped into a diving turn, airspeed building, energy returning. He was no longer the hunted. The geometry had reversed. The 109s were now in front of him, slow and vulnerable, trying to extend away. He squeezed the trigger. 8 Browning machine guns hammered. Tracers walked up the spine of the trailing 109. The canopy shattered. Smoke poured from the engine. The Messerschmitt rolled lazily and began its fall toward the sea. The second 109 broke hard left. Eric followed, tighter now, understanding the rhythm. He fired again. Short burst. Controlled. The rounds caught the German's wing root. Fuel ignited. The 109 became a comet, trailing fire, spiraling down. Van der Merwe's voice returned, breathless. 3. What the hell was that? Eric did not answer. His hands were shaking now. Adrenaline flooded his system. He climbed back toward the formation, scanning for more threats. The remaining 109s had scattered. The trap had collapsed. The Spitfires regrouped, battered but intact. The bombers completed their run and turned for home. When they landed, the ground crew counted 14 holes in Eric's Spitfire. His squadron mate stood in silence as he climbed out, sweat-soaked, pale, barely able to stand. Van der Merwe walked up to him, studied him for a long moment, then said, "That was the stupidest thing I've ever seen." He paused. "Do it again." The squadron leader was less charitable. He called Eric into his tent and demanded an explanation. Eric tried. He talked about pursuit curves, about energy states, about forcing an overshoot by creating an unpredictable speed differential. The leader listened, frowning. Finally he said, "You slowed down. In a dogfight. On purpose." "Yes, sir. That's not in the manual." "No, sir." The leader leaned back. "You got 2 confirmed kills. You survived an ambush that should have killed you, and you did it by breaking every rule we teach." He rubbed his face. "I don't know if you're brilliant or insane." "Maybe both, sir." The leader almost smiled. "Write it up. Every detail. If this works, other pilots need to know." Eric wrote it up. 3 pages. Diagrams included. He called it defensive speed reduction, but the other pilots had a simpler name. They called it the professor's trick. Within a week, it had spread to 3 other squadrons. Within a month, RAF tactical bulletins mentioned it. Within 6 months, it was being taught at flight schools as a counter to high-speed bounces. The logic was simple. Pursuit required prediction. Prediction required pattern. If you broke the pattern, you broke the pursuit. Slowing down when the enemy expected acceleration created a mismatch. The attacker overshot. The roles reversed. It only worked once per engagement. It required perfect timing. But in that perfect moment, it turned certain death into advantage. Eric flew 43 more missions over Sicily and Italy. He shot down 9 more aircraft. He never used the trick again. He did not need to. His reputation preceded him. German pilots learned to be cautious when engaging lone Spitfires that flew too slowly. The hesitation cost them. By October 1943, Eric had been promoted to flight lieutenant. The promotion came with a new posting. He was reassigned to 611 Squadron, based in southern England, tasked with bomber escort missions over occupied France. The Battle of Berlin was ramping up. RAF Bomber Command was sending hundreds of Lancasters and Halifaxes into the heart of Germany every night. The daylight missions were smaller, but no less brutal. The Luftwaffe was desperate, defending the Reich with everything they had. Experienced pilots, veteran formations, aircraft equipped with heavy cannons designed to shred bombers from 1,000 yards. Eric's new squadron commander was a man named Group Captain Thornhill. He had flown Hurricanes during the Battle of Britain. He had scars across his hands from a cockpit fire. He did not smile often. During Eric's first briefing, Thornhill looked at him across a map table covered in reconnaissance photos and said, "I read your report from Sicily, the one about slowing down." "Yes, sir." Do you still believe it works? Under the right conditions, yes. Thornhill nodded slowly. The conditions over Germany are different. The flak is thicker. The fighters are better coordinated. The margins are thinner. He tapped the map. But the principles are sound. Speed and altitude are not always safety. Sometimes unpredictability is. He met Eric's eyes. I want you training the new pilots. Teach them what you learned. Eric spent the next 3 weeks running mock engagements over the English coast. He flew against pilots with twice his experience. He demonstrated the maneuver over and over. Most of them understood the theory, but struggled with the execution. The instinct to keep speed, to keep power, to keep moving was too deeply ingrained. Slowing down felt like death. It required overriding every survival reflex. One pilot, a Canadian named Morrison, finally got it right. During a practice bounce, he chopped throttle at the perfect moment. Eric overshot, exactly as planned. Morrison reversed, got guns on, and called the kill. When they landed, Morrison was shaking. That felt wrong the entire time, he said, like falling off a cliff. That's the point, Eric replied. If it feels wrong to you, it feels impossible to them. On November 9th, the squadron launched a maximum effort. 24 Spitfires escorting 18B, 17 flying fortresses to a target near Lille. The bombers were hitting a railway marshalling yard. Intelligence expected heavy resistance. They were right. The formation crossed the channel at 15,000 feet. By the time they reached the French coast, radar stations had already alerted the fighter bases. Within minutes, German fighters began climbing to intercept. Eric flew as yellow leader, commanding a flight of 4 Spitfires on the high port flank. His wingmen were Morrison, a quiet Scotsman named Fraser, and a 19-year-old from Leeds named Talbot. They stayed tight, scanning the sky, watching the contrails forming in the cold November air. The bombers droned ahead, steady and vulnerable. The flak started over Arras, black puffs blooming around the formation. 1B-17 took a hit in the number 3 engine. It kept flying. Then the fighters appeared. Not BF-109s this time. Focke-Wulf 190s. Faster, heavier armed, more dangerous. 12 of them, in 3 flights of 4, sweeping in from the north at 20,000 feet. They had the altitude. They had the position. They came in fast, picking their targets with cold precision. Eric keyed his radio. Yellow flight heads up. 190s, 12 o'clock high. Stay with me. The 190s dove. Their leader selected the trailing B-17, the one with the damaged engine. The fortress was struggling to keep formation. It was slow. It was wounded. It was perfect prey. For 190s rolled into a near-vertical dive, their noses tracking the bomber. The gunners in the B-17 opened fire. 50 caliber tracers arced upward. The 190s ignored them. They closed to 600 yards. 500. 400. Eric pushed his throttle forward and climbed to intercept. His Spitfire clawed for altitude. The 190s were faster in the dive, but Eric had started his turn early. He cut the angle, closing the distance. His 3 wingmen followed, strung out behind him. The 190s reached firing range. Their cannons opened up. 20mm shells tore into the B-17's wing. Metal peeled away. Fuel streamed from ruptured tanks. The 190s dove. Both groups simultaneously. Eric pulled into a climbing turn, meeting the high group head-on. Talbot stayed glued to his wing. The 190s opened fire at 1,000 yards. Cannon shells streaked past. Eric held his course, closing the distance, waiting. 800 yards. 700. He could see the lead 190 clearly now. Its broad wings, its radial engine, the flickering muzzle flash from its guns. 600 yards. Eric fired. Short burst. Controlled. His rounds converged on the lead 190's nose. The German pulled up hard, breaking off the attack. The other 3 scattered, their attack run disrupted. Eric rolled inverted and pulled through, keeping his speed, staying aggressive. Talbot followed, textbook perfect. But the southern group had broken through. Morrison and Fraser were outnumbered, 2 against 4. They fought hard. scissoring and weaving, trying to stay between the 190s and the bomber. But the Germans were relentless. One 190 slipped through. It lined up on the B-17, closing from behind and below. The bomber's ball turret gunner fired. The round sparked off the 190's cowling. The German did not flinch. He closed to 300 yards. 200. Eric saw it happening. He was too far, too high, too slow. The 190 fired. Cannon shells hammered the B-17's fuselage. The tail gunner's position disintegrated. The bomber shuddered, its controls damaged, its crew dying. It began to roll, slowly, sickeningly, toward an uncontrolled descent. Morrison's voice, raw with desperation. "I can't get to him. I can't." Eric did not think. He pulled the throttle back. The engine noise dropped. His Spitfire slowed. He rolled inverted and pulled the nose down, bleeding altitude and speed, positioning himself in front of the attacking 190. It was insane. He was making himself a target. He was violating every rule of energy management. But he was also doing something the German pilot could not predict. The 190 was committed to its attack on the bomber. Its pilot was focused, tunnel-visioned, lining up the killing shot. He did not see Eric's Spitfire drift into his path until it was too late. Eric's aircraft appeared in his windscreen, slow and vulnerable, blocking his line of fire. The 190 pilot had two choices: break off or collide. He broke off. Hard right, pulling 6 GS, abandoning the attack. His wingman followed, confused. The formation discipline shattered. Eric shoved his throttle forward, added power, rolled upright. His airspeed climbed. The 190s extended away, no longer a threat. The B-17 stabilized. Barely. Its pilot regained partial control. It continued its descent, but controlled now, headed for the coast. Morrison and Fraser regrouped. Talbot called out the all-clear. The remaining 190s climbed away, their fuel running low, their opportunity lost. "I was terrified," he said. "Every part of my brain was screaming to run, but I had been thinking about pursuit for months. I had sketched it out, worked through the geometry, and I realized that speed is only an advantage if your enemy cannot predict it. The moment they predict you, you are trapped by your own velocity. So I gave them something they could not predict." The historian asked if he believed it would work. "No," Eric admitted. "I thought I was about to die, but I was going to die anyway if I did what they expected. So I did the opposite, and it turned out that the opposite was exactly what I needed." The interview was published in a military aviation journal. It was read by fighter pilots, tacticians, historians. Eric received letters from around the world, former enemies, Allied veterans, pilots who had used his maneuver and survived because of it. He answered every letter. He never claimed to have invented anything revolutionary. He always said he had simply thought through a problem and found a solution. That was all it was. A problem, a solution, and the courage to trust his own mind when everything else told him to trust his instincts. Eric Hartwell died in 1992 at the age of 76. His obituary in the Times mentioned his wartime service, his DFC, his 14 kills. It did not mention the maneuver, but in fighter squadrons around the world, instructors still teach it. They show the diagrams. They explain the geometry. They tell the story of a 17-year-old cadet who panicked in a dive and did the one thing no one expected. He slowed down. And in slowing down, he survived. And in surviving, he changed how fighter pilots think about speed, energy, and unpredictability. The lesson was never really about flying. It was about thinking, about seeing the pattern everyone else followed and choosing a different path, about understanding that advantage is not always about being faster or stronger. Sometimes advantage is about being unexpected, about forcing your enemy to confront a reality they did not prepare for, about staying calm when panic would be easier, about trusting your mind when your body wants to run. 60 years after Eric pulled that throttle back over Sicily, a young F-16 pilot used the same principle to evade a missile lock during a training exercise over Nevada. The missile seeker expected acceleration. The pilot decelerated. The missile overshot. The engagement reset. When the pilot landed, his instructor asked him where he learned that. The pilot said he had read about it in a tactical manual. A footnote, a reference to a Spitfire pilot in 1943. A kid named Hartwell. The instructor nodded. That move has saved more lives than we'll ever count, he said. And it all started because one pilot was willing to think instead of react. That is the legacy. Not the kills. Not the medals. Not even the survival. The legacy is the idea. The understanding that combat is not just physical. It is intellectual. It is psychological. And the pilot who controls the psychology controls the fight. Eric understood that before he ever fired a shot. He understood it in a tent in North Africa, sketching pursuit curves by candlelight. He understood it in the seconds before a Messerschmitt would have killed him. And because he understood it, thousands of others learned it. And because they learned it, they lived. If you enjoy real World War II stories, where skill and courage change history, subscribe for more. The question is not whether you have the speed, or the altitude, or the numbers. The question is whether you have the clarity to see what your enemy expects, and the courage to do the opposite. Eric Hartwell did, and the sky remembered.